You could hit record, I guess. Oh, there we're recording. So welcome everybody. I'm Steve Lander, Director of Pavement Management for WithersRavenel, and today's Lunch and Learn is the evolution of microsurfacing. So I think you're going to really enjoy this one. Hope everybody's staying well and staying safe. And the intent of all of our Lunch and Learns is to introduce new practices. Maybe not, it's not new to the industry, but it might be new to you. And how do we get these practices into your pavement management toolbox? And mill and fills have its place, but it's not everywhere. And Troy is going to tell you about how he has used this in his prior employment and now where he is to extend the life of the roads. So we suggest that you try these things out on your roads, and education is key. Alrighty, so I'm going to post in the chat area. There's going to be some links, and the first link is if you need PDHs, just hit that top link and fill out the form. There is a link to the WithersRavenel website, one for Aragon, one for Hernando County, and then there's one that's really cool is the roadresources.org. These are all great resources to help you with your pavement management. So if you need those PDHs, just fill out the form. The Lunch and Learns are all recorded. So if you have to jump off for some reason and you want to get the PDH credits or you just want to show it to other folks, just let us know and we can get you that recording. And also too is that you can get a copy of the presentation as well. So one of the things we like to, and no one's ever actually, except for a couple, give us comments on what they would like for us to present on or have folks from the industry talk about. One of them is traffic control, but I think everybody's so busy in traffic control, no one wants to take the time to do a presentation. So anyway, just let us know in the chat if there's anything of interest to you. So we're having some technical difficulties, but we have a workaround. Amy Blada is supposed to be here with Troy to present. She was going to kick it off, but she's struggling to get on. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Troy present first, and hopefully by the time that Troy is finished that Amy will have joined us and she can do her part of the presentation. So what we're looking to do is they're going to be speaking for about 45 minutes. Everybody's on mute, and just feel free to ask questions during the presentation because we want to try to create as much of a conversation as possible with everybody being muted. So, some quick introductions. Amy's a graduate of South University of Florida. She's been working in the public works industry for 14 years. She actually grew up in public works. Her dad was a public works director. She has been advocating pavement preservation for the past 6 years, past president of Florida APWA. She's a board member of Facers. She's really, she's a pavement avenger, as Troy is as well. And I've known both Troy and Amy for years. Troy is a senior project manager at Hernando County, Florida. He oversees the staff that reviews all commercial and new subdivision development along GIS layers within the county. He manages and develops Hernando County's pavement management program with over 1,300 centerline miles. And he has 30 years in the industry. And I'll tell you that when his prior employer, Lakeland, Florida, he really developed a robust pavement management program, which included micro. I mean, I think of Troy as being like the micro guy. He just used it and had good results. Before I kick it off to Troy, I'm going to share my screen to show what are kind of some general ranges of where things should be applied. So as you can see, this is a curve that most folks have seen, and this is kind of the general areas where different pavement management treatments that lie on the curve. And so today what we're going to be talking about is what we call preservation correct, which is your microsurfacing, slurry, other thin treatments. And, you know, we have a range here of PCI score of about 65 to 87. And Troy and I were talking earlier that this is just a cutoff. This is a network level range. And so when you get into the field, you may be selecting 90s because it's grouped in with a bunch of 80s, or vice versa. You know, you might have some 60s in there that are grouped in with some 70s and 80s, but you can do some fixing to it. You know, and we always recommend that you do the preparatory fixing of the fatigue, cracking, any type of pothole and patching, and crack sealing prior to doing any of these treatments. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm gonna let Troy take it from here.
All right, let me go ahead and share my screen, and see, there it is. So hopefully everybody can see my screen there.
Got it.
So anyway, again, my name is Troy McCain. A little perspective, obviously, I was in Lakeland for over 30 years. Some of that time was in GIS. So really, the first couple of slides that I'm going to show you really just came from a pavement management presentation that the previous coordinator did with our city commission. So Lakeland, again, was pretty proactive with pavement preservation even way back in the 80s. So again, one of these first slides, just kind of go over what Lakeland did back in the early 80s. One thing we did do, I know a lot of the folks up north, they do a lot of the chip sealing. We did do that in 1991. And again, I think that success was a good outcome. The biggest issue we had was the local citizens. Citizens in Lakeland, they wanted a smooth road. So it was discontinued in 1991. And again, not really because it didn't do its job, just because of the rough texture. Again, you can see the cost back then was $1.50 a square yard. Again, the life expectancy was around 7 years. Another strategy we used in Lakeland back exclusively from 1971 and 1988. Again, slurry seal was next process that they used. Again, looking at, it was a good success. The big drawback then was that it required the 8 to 9 hours to keep traffic off of. And any of us know, typically doing subdivision work, it's hard to keep vehicles off. Everybody's got to take their kids to school. You got doctor's appointments and all that kind of stuff. So again, they used that a lot from 1971 and 1988. Microservicing, again, when I came on board with the construction maintenance office in early 2000, micro was already being used. So I sort of inherited a program where it was already a big microservicing program. Again, you can see what microservicing is: a blend of fresh aggregate, chemical formulation. Typically, a double microsurface is around 3/8 thick. Again, they've used that ever since 1981. Again, I wouldn't throw in the cost. Again, this came from the presentation they did back in 91, but the cost in 1986 for a double surface or double micro was $1.77. 2013, one of contracts I put out, we've got the double micro for $3.25. The bid I just did up here in Hernando for double conventional, I got $6.85, and for the premium is $7.45. Again, singles, we didn't do a whole lot of singles. At least I didn't when I came on board early 2000. I just felt like the double surface was the best way to go. Again, it was very effective, and even with the years I was there, almost 20 years, I was getting a good 10 years average out of most of my residential roads. Projects using microservicing. One thing I had done back in Lakeland was, if I had a road that had a lot of soil cement base, so the cracks were real prevalent. Again, funding I put in for a capital improvement project. just hoping to get the money so I could do a full depth job on that down the road. So in the meantime, I went ahead and put a micro on it just to kind of slow down some of the cracking, kind of make it a smoother road before I could get those funds generated and proceed with full depth reclamation job. This is typically streets in Lakeland, Buena Vista. So you can see there it's kind of in the middle. So Buena Vista has two collector roads on either side, on the east and west side. Again, I had a lot of history. One good thing that Lakeland did, they did keep up with historical data. Again, I think that's important with a lot of the software programs, specifically MicroPaver that we use. You want to know what has been done on that road. So again, Buena Vista sort of had plenty of history on that. Again, this road gets used a lot because it sort of cuts through. You can't really see the hospital is kind of where that little round area is to the left. So a lot of people again utilize this road as sort of a cut through. So when you look over the history of that pavement, it's a little over 4,000 square yards. So the first record I had in 1983, they did surface treatment. It came back in 96. They did a double micro. When I came on board, I actually did a Cape Seal and a double micro. And 2013, I did another double micro. And to this day, that road is not on any 3 to 5 year pavement plan. So again, you can look at the cost of those treatments. So, in theory, if you want to do a mill and overlay, I sort of compared that. And I used the cost from 1996 to get that cost. And again, 2013, I got that cost. So you can see the kind of price difference for that same 30-year period. Obviously, the savings comes around a little over $33,000. Again, this is, just for one single street, which is like 0.35 miles. So you sort of compare that to a mile. So if that was a mile-long street, you were looking at maybe around $95,000 for total cost savings for that. Again, for Lakeland, we did probably 80%, 85% of our residential roads had micro on it. Again, another big project that we did was Joker Market Stadium, Detroit Tigers, their spring training. So a little history on that whole Tiger Town complex. You could kind of see the barracks or whatever. A lot of that area, just along the barracks, was old runways. They were old concrete runways from back in World War II. Had anywhere from 8 to 10 inches of concrete. The cracks were really wide. Prior to doing this microsurfacing project on this, there was actually a Cape Seal done with a double micro over top of it. So sort of history there. So I didn't have the date when they actually did that Cape Seal. But again, this was sort of the area before we went with the new micro. You can see the microsurfacing that was put on there. It started wearing off. So we came in and look at the same area. This is the same area after the micro. And I think we got another picture here while the work was being done. So again, it was a large parking lot. And so this sort of the finished project. And one thing we did have to do with redoing this whole parking lot is your ADA spaces. So I'm not sure, I don't think we met the requirements at the time before we did this project. Important thing, obviously, with any kind of microsurfacing in parking lots or any kind of alteration is to address your handicap spots. So we looked at the number of spots we had and we made sure that we met the criteria. And you can see a lot of those handicap spots there now. So proper pavement preservation, again, this is sort of Lakeland. I kind of fed that onto Lakeland. If anybody in the industry in Florida back in 2006 timeframe, there was some issues with micro in Florida specifically. I'm not sure of anywhere else, but I know not only us, there's several other agencies down south that had some microsurfacing done that started delaminating. within a year and a half. So in 2013, we just went ahead with the contract. We put in specifically in the contract that we wanted a 3-year warranty on any microsurfacing work in the future. Again, the other things we kind of looked at to make sure that we follow through was the calibration. We were kind of lax in that in the past. We sort of said, the contractor said, hey, we calibrated our trucks at a previous job. Can we go ahead and move forward and come into town and continue your work? Again, while I was in Lakeland, we did do a 6% polymer subdivision. And again, this is sort of just a snapshot of a calibration being performed at the contractor site. Most of the new trucks now, they give you a digital readout. Again, get your inspector, get him knowledgeable in calibration. And again, you want to make sure you get those tickets while the work is being done to ensure you're getting your proper pounds that you're getting per square yard. So again, Lakeland in the past was sort of lax on that. So it's important to educate your inspectors, whoever's going to be on the job site. Again, this was, it was kind of, I did a project where we did utilize the 6% polymer, the high premium. And for whatever reason, they came up, they had a little bit left over. And I actually did a side-by-side comparison with the high polymer versus the conventional micro. Again, I did this back in 2014. Again, this road has not been touched since. One thing I want to point out was what I noticed real quick was the tire burns where, you could see cars traveling through the center line there. And, it just appeared to me, even back in 2014, that, it seemed like that 6% was a much durable, surface, and you didn't see those tire burns as clear as you did on the conventional. So moving to Hernando County, I actually started Hernando County in 2022 in June. So quickly, part of my purview is to look over the 5-year projected plans that they already had in place. And one of the roads we had was, they called it like a Spring Hill. It's an area of town. Again, this was already set in place before I started. And one thing, when looking at all the projects and looking at the description, everything that we had up here in Hernando prior to me getting here last year was to mill and fill an inch. Again, there's really no record of what the PCIs were. It was simply, that's the strategy that Hernando has been accustomed to doing.
Hey, Troy, we got a question that would you recommend single or double micro on high ADT roads and deep freeze states? And I think you're going to say double micros all the way. Yeah,
I've rarely performed any singles. It just because, one wear surface, you're down to the original road. My thinking was, because I was getting 10 years out of a double, if I'm going to impact the residents, a single, you may get 5 to 7 years. I just felt like I could stretch that time frame out and not have to impact those residents, but once every 10 years.
Got another question. Did you notice an increase in project costs due to 3-year warranty requirements?
No, I didn't. Yeah, there was no increase in cost. The only increase in cost we've really seen lately is just for materials. So it wasn't something directly tied to that warranty.
Is the warranty for materials and labor, and how would you enforce it?
Well, I guess because it's in the contract, I guess if we had to, we would go through our legal department and come up with some sort of, cost or some kind of reimbursement. It's my guess. Like I said, we never really had to push it, but I think it gave us that leverage if there was, some delamination or some failure. That's something obviously we would work with our legal department and, force that contract. Okay, so this is what was proposed for 23 and what was budgeted. It was around $1.3 million. They had some funds in there for design. So again, so one of the first things I did was, hey, let's go take a look at these roads. So I went out there and I was amazed how good a condition they were. Again, I wasn't part of the process of even selecting these roads. They were kind of in the works. So I said, man, I could do a micro on this. This is the first quote. This is the actual final invoice. And one thing I did on when I first got Hernando was I piggybacked off an existing bid. So Polk County was in Lakeland, so I knew those folks. I knew they had a bid out there for micro. Again, going to another agency, learning their procurement, and then see how they do stuff. So I talked to them and I said, hey, if the local contractor, they agree to piggyback, can I simply piggyback on Polk County's bid? So the very first project I did in this particular area, I'm not sure if you guys can read it. It's basically says the Polk County contract. So our procurement folks here in Hernando, they like that piggyback option. They figure that due diligence was done on Polk County's end. Polk County put it out publicly to bid. So again, we were able to piggyback on that bid, get approval through our commission, and proceed with getting the work. So again, this is just the invoice just for the double micro. Again, just like Steve alluded to earlier, we had some of those roads that had some patching requirements. So again, it's important to do those before you perform this double micro. Look at those areas. There was some alligator cracking, and so yes, there's going to be a cost associated with that. But end of the day, again, when I went out there, the average of all those were 68. Again, I probably had some in the 70s. I probably had some in the high 50s, mid to high 50s. But overall, the whole area looked pretty good. And literally the final cost was around $330,000. And again, what was budgeted, I've almost saved close to $1 million there just on that one project.
I got a quick question. How many pounds per square yard do you recommend on double micro, and do you make adjustments based on the traffic conditions?
Don't make adjustments. I think our spec calls from 28 to 32 pounds for a double micro. As far as traffic, we haven't had any issues with additional traffic. One thing that we have had before is some rutting. So if you got a road that's got quite a bit of rutting, we did have a line item just to fill in those ruts. One thing with microservicing with the box, most companies have like a screed that's on the back of it. So if you did have a road that had some of those voids you wanted to fill, we did have a price item for that. So they would go in there previously, go ahead and do the rut filling, that set up and dry, and then proceed with the double micro. But
stealing some of Amy's thunder, that it was developed for the Autobahn, right? So was it used on high volume streets, or yes, for rutting specifically?
Yeah. Oh yeah, and again, I use it on plenty of collector roads in Lakeland. So there's some of the engineers out there, and some of them are leery. They typically like to look at the 35 miles an hour per hour, and they want to mill and fill everything above that. So again, we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, where some of this houses in different agencies. So again, the cost savings on that road again was close to $1 million. So one thing I wanted to do, I wanted to go ahead and develop Hernando's own bid for micro. The main reason I wanted to do that was go ahead and get this premium micro. Like I said, I'd used it back in Lakeland 2014. I liked it. So I had an opportunity here to go ahead and put that bid out. So there you can get in to see typically your microsourcing bids, the prices do go down with the volume. So obviously if you do a lot of work, the prices do go down per square yard. And there you can see, I went ahead and included, when those bids went out, I want to go ahead and have that conventional, everything tied to Hernando County, so I wouldn't have to worry about piggybacking on Polk County's bid, which I had done previously. Again, this is one of the first projects we did, and just like this quote here, I mean, I was really impressed. Again, I've been around a lot of micro, and you're always going to have those cars that need to go in their driveways. And the biggest thing I noticed was just with the cars simply driving across their driveways, you could see tire marks, but you just really didn't see any damage to the micro itself. And so far, it's been down several months now, and the biggest thing is the pit marks. Some of you guys have done some of the micro in the past. You know, the pit marks are typically all the complaints you get from residents, especially if they've never seen this process.
Interesting, Troy, is that there's some places that love micro and they'll do tons of it, and there's some places that don't. But when you look at a picture like this,
Yeah.
I mean, who could complain, right?
Yeah, and like I said, there's a lot of folks still in Florida when you know, micro sort of got a bad name back in the you know, mid 2000s. Again, Lakeland was part of that bunch. It was simply you know, a compatible rock issue with emulsion. So you know, there were some issues there. So you know, that gets spread around. A lot of agencies talk to each other, and so you know, it quickly can become, you know, a bad name, like, oh no, we used it, it was crap. So again, Lakeland had plenty of history for that product in the past. So I was convinced, hey, this is, you know, just a bad batch or whatever you want to call it. So again, a lot of that stuff got corrected. And again, that's one reason we sort of went to that 3-year warranty going forward.
Yeah, it's so important to make sure that the stone matches with,
Yeah.
you know, with the emulsions, right? You can't switch out stone, right? Otherwise you end up with all sorts of problems.
Yeah. So yeah, you want to make sure all that stuff gets tested in the lab. You want to see those results. So those contractors that we work here in Florida with, they do provide that mix design and make sure that is a suitable compatibility there. Again, this is some more pictures of the micro we did. One thing I kind of wanted to say on this slide, a lot of people can see where that edge, you know, we didn't go quite to the edge. Now this is a bottom course, scratch course, or whatever you want to call it. Typically in micro, you don't want that build up. Obviously, there's not going to be a whole lot of traffic along that edge of the road. The same thing with the center line. I typically try to get my contractor to not overlap too much. I don't want that little high joint there in the middle of the road. Again, some more pictures. This is you know, the final product, one of these roads. And so I want to show this picture. Obviously, the left side what was previously done probably the day before. This other side on the right, it was just laid. Obviously, you can see the color changes in that. So that brownish color will turn just a dark black with that. Within like 20-25 minutes, it'll be just as black. So you know, have your inspectors know that's what to look for. Look for that, you know, that change to happen. And a lot of that, you know, you're looking at, that's not tack or anything, that's just water coming out top of that micro. So again, you can leave a footprint if it's real wet, but again, that evaporates pretty quick. Obviously, in our Florida sun, you know, we were getting, you know, cars turned out there in like 45 minutes.
Starting to get some questions rolling in.
Okay.
Is there a minimum maximum width that you can use this application? For example, can you use this application for asphalt greenway trails or park pathway resurfacing?
Yeah, there are different box widths that contractors have. You know, obviously we have 10, 11, 12-foot lanes. So there's different boxes they can attach to those trucks. Now, I think I know some contractors actually have adjustable ones that actually adjust on the fly. If you do have a road that may go, you know, change widths throughout.
Yeah, I'm gonna go down to like 8 feet too.
Yeah. So most trails are 8 feet. And I haven't ever personally micro surfaced a trail, obviously, because you got a lot of trees. So that may pose an issue there, but not to say I wouldn't if that came up.
Hey, Troy, do you have any experience with rumble strips and the double application, micro application?
Well, now with rumble strips now, Lakeland, we had a ton of raised humps. Shoot, I don't know how many we had. We probably had a couple hundred. So with those, it all depends. I have microed over some of our previous traffic humps and restriped them. Other ones, if the asphalt was in good condition, I would simply tape off on either side of it. If the striping was good, I would tape over the whole hump. That way you're not, you know, kind of messing up your striping. but we didn't really have a whole lot of rumble strips there in Lakeland.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the rumble strips, you'd probably want to micro up to the rumble strips, you know, and if you had to do them over the rumble strips, you might have to recut them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
Yep.
Yeah, I would not advise going over rumble strips. Yeah.
yeah. Hey, so question about the edge, you know, where you're putting basically the shim, you know, the first course. Are there any long-term issues with deterioration at the edges? And by the way, I'll just add that Troy has done triples on his road, so he knows about buildup and and all that.
Yeah, and again, I inherited agency, you know, when I came in early 2000s that did plenty of micro and even some Cape seal. So in Lakeland, we had a lot of the 4-inch border curb. So yeah, again, you're not going to get that wearing right along the gutter line there. So again, I would say probably Lakeland 60, maybe 65% of the roads, the residential roads, had 3 lifts of double micro on them. Again, at some point down the road, it was, you know, my recommendation going forward would be do an edge mill. If you're worried about that curb exposure, you're worried about any kind of drainage issue. Again, you may want to do some edge milling again with micro for any of your curb ramps. And you know, if you need to mill down, or you know, again, you want to try to match any curb ramps. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but again, microsurfacing is an alteration, so those curb ramps will need to be looked at. Future work, just touch on what my plans are for the future. Again, these roads were set in motion before I got here. Another good sized subdivision. We had it budgeted for $2.5 million. I went ahead and got with our local contractor and I said, hey, you know, I need a price going forward. We're hoping to do this project hopefully between Thanksgiving and Christmas this year, if I can get all the approvals. Again, you know, you look at just at the cost savings of this area as well. So going forward, pavement management definition. Again, I don't need to read that for you. A lot of you folks have probably already seen that. So really, I want to talk about some of the planning tools and stuff like that that you may run into. Again, I mentioned earlier, agencies do things a little bit different. When I was in Lakeland, pavement management, along with all patch crews, we managed anything in the streets in Lakeland. We did that in basically the operations division. So any utility cuts, anything that happened in roadways, we were the ones inspecting it and making sure, especially if you had a good road and your water department had a break or whatever, and you allowed them to open cut and make that repair. You want to make sure that repair is done correctly, especially if you want to come back later on and put a microservice on top of it. So again, Hernando's a little bit different. Our patch guys are basically in our operations. So that's something that I'm planning on addressing, and I've kind of addressed it since I've been here, is making sure if that road is something I'm going to micro down in the future, I want to make sure those patches are done right. So again, touch on real quick about pavement management software. Lakeland, we use Micropaver for most of the time I was there. They sort of went to Lucity. Hernando County, currently we have Micropaver here. The one thing that I've seen, and again, there's a multitude of programs out there, having a GIS background like I did, it's important to have that GIS compatible, because you can always develop your maps to get out to the public. And predictive modeling, that's obviously a big tool that I used in the program. It really gives you some, you know, guidelines to start your program. Again, I always was the guy who laid my eyes on anything before I proceeded with any work. And one thing I learned in Hernando, if your agency has not done microservicing, you need to educate your directors, your commissioners, because once you put this stuff on the ground, you will get those calls coming in from residents complaining about, especially cul-de-sac areas. So, you know, just to have everybody be in the know of what's going on. Again, Lakeland performed a reverse call, similar to a lot of what guys did or what schools do with your kids. We do require the contractor to put out notices 48 hours in advance to actually doing the work. Again, it's important to get that communication out there. You know, with all your social media, do whatever you can to inform the public. One thing I just want to make a note of too, that existing thermo, if you do a road, existing thermo will need to be partially removed. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. Again, GIS, for me, it was a great way to really quickly look at your ramps, look at your striping. Again, in Lakeland, we actually added some bike lanes. If I had a road that was wide enough and I got with my traffic division, they're like, hey, let's throw a bike lane down one side if you do have the width. So again, you're kind of a blank slate with microservicing. So look at those possibilities of, you know, added bike lanes, or look at your stripe and any kind of updates you want to do with that. Again, microservicing is alteration. All your curb ramps will need to be looked at. And again, need to be, typically I did all mine prior to the microservicing. That way, when they built a new ramp, I knew I'm adding roughly 3/8 of an inch. I can leave that and I can tie into that when I did my job. Going forward, this is just a clip from the ADA from the technical assistance, and clearly at the bottom you can see microservicing is considered an alteration. Some of your other ones above are not. Again, I've seen all this stuff later on, so you know there's been a lot of sort of talk in the industry about, you know, where some of these things belong. Again, ramps. One thing with microservicing, it allows you to do the returns. If you guys all do milling and paving projects, those returns are a pain to do because you typically have to get a small bump mill out there. So again, if you do microservicing and all these 4 roads are yours and you do touch that ramp, just keep in mind that ramp will need to be adjusted to meet the new guidelines.
Hey, Troy, could you talk about the handwork that's around the ramps, and you know, because it's not just a straight pole, and also with cul-de-sacs.
Yeah.
You know, we have the success and lots of handwork, right?
Yeah, there is a bunch of handwork, and again, cul-de-sacs. The chief complaint that I typically got in Lakeland was cul-de-sacs, because you got a square box that's going to a round area. You're going to see some of those drag marks from the boxes. So, you know, initially, you know, it does look kind of rough. Again, I tell people, give me 3 to 4 months and call me back, and we'll see if some of that stuff is rolled out.
Yep, it gets worked in, right? Hey, so how about the snow plowable reflectors? How do you handle those? I mean, I guess you know in Florida you don't have snow, but I would imagine that they would need to come up though.
Oh yeah, again, along with the thermo, you want to rough that thermo up. You know, one thing I did up here in Hernando, we had a line item with a contractor did our stripe removal. So I actually went to them and said, hey, I've got some microsurfacing jobs. So I was able to work with those guys and get a reduced price. Again, micro, you don't need to obliterate the whole line. Typically, we like to stay like 60% of the thermo needs to come down. Obviously, the RPMs will need to be popped off prior to doing your work.
Might have to cruise through here to give Amy some space.
I know, yeah, I'm trying to cruise here. So I'm almost done here. So the one thing I want to touch on back here, obviously, other jurisdictions when you're doing returns, I think we've all seen that no man's land between the agencies. Really, the future concerns is still looking at the ADA. One thing we did in Lakeland was we created a line item just for ADA related, whether it was buildings, roads, or whatever. So that's something your agency may want to address with your commissioners and stuff like that. So obviously another concern is the increased cost for material. So again, I'm not sure if Amy, you want to jump in on this one or?
I think let me do mine and then we'll go back to this one.
Okay.
That's cool. Okay.
Let me stop sharing my screen here.
All right. I will share screen.
Overcoming obstacles. Our pavement Avengers are prevailing.
Oops. From beginning.
Here you go.
Okay. So yeah, sorry about my IT difficulties, everyone. And I'm sure I was introduced when I could not get on, but I'm Amy Blada. I'm out of Florida. I work for Ergon Asphalt and Emulsions. And thank you for being here with us today. I'm going to kind of go through this quickly so we don't keep everyone late. But as we all know, Microsurfacing is part of slurry surfacing systems, and they all are laboratory design mixtures of asphalt emulsion, aggregate, mineral filler, water, and other additives that are accurately proportioned, mixed and uniformly spread over a properly prepared surface, as Troy has mentioned. So where did this all begin? Back in 1930, Germany developed slurry seal, and it was called Schlemme. And then 20 years later, we see it in the US over in California. And then in 1960, Germany needed something to basically fill their wheel ruts and at the same time not destroy their expensive line striping. So they developed microsurfacing. And it wasn't until 25 years later that we see it in the US. First project was actually in Kansas. It was called Ralumac at the time. 10 years later, we start to see some slurry modification where they're adding some polymer to slurry. And then about a little over 10 years ago, we see the development and introduction of highly modified microsurfacing, also called premium microsurfacing, or 6% or high mod, as I'm going to be basically referring to it today. So here's the difference between conventional and modified systems. When we're comparing conventional slurry systems, we can see that conventional microsurfacing contains about 3 to 3.5% modification of an SBR, which is a specific type of polymer. A modified slurry seal, you're going to see about 1.5 to 2.5% SBR modification, and your conventional slurry seal is going to have 0 modification. And so with the premium or highly modified microsurfacing, we're looking at about double, so 6% of SBS modification of that binder, which is a different, type of polymer than SBR. And so SBS has some unique properties and polymers that enable us to get this into an emulsion where it can be used and the benefits can be realized. So due to some of the early damage that the industry has seen with conventional systems, like Troy had referred to before, and I'll show you some examples too, there was a need for an improvement and innovation, hence the highly modified or premium slurry systems. It is important. It is obviously, made a different way. The SBS polymer has to be incorporated into the asphalt and tested prior to the emulsification process. And there's a couple other differences that you see over here with slurry and conventional in terms of the thickness that it can be applied. As Troy mentioned, we can apply, microsurfacing can be applied multiple times. And let's see. Okay, so, and you've seen pictures. It's really hard to tell the difference really between asphalt and microsurfacing. Microsurfacing is basically a new thin lift overlay. It can be applied over existing asphalt, chip or scrub, and it basically acts as a new wearing surface. And as Troy said, we just do double micro down here in Florida. So you're going to see a thickness of about 3/8 of an inch. So this is when we start talking about how to ensure that our agencies, that you are using the right specifications and mix designs to receive the value and benefits of these highly modified systems and ensure that you are getting what you spec. So specifications, mix design are extremely, extremely important. With conventional microsurfacing, what you see in the specs, the conventional methods only determine proportion and properties. With the highly modified microsurfacing, you can get an updated mix design by using the DSR, MSCR, Cantabro, and ideal CT test. These are the emulsion testing requirements. We see conventional on the left and premium on the right. So for premium microsurfacing, we're not testing viscosity or penetration or ring and ball softening point or other conventional specs and methods. Just like we don't test asphalt binder the same way it was done for years, meaning pen graded. So MSCR, which is part of the highly modified spec that you see on the right side, it loads the sample multiple times and measures how well it recovers from stress in that scenario. So this is going to relate to performance in the field on actual roadways and not just how it looks in a tank. So basically, you can't fool the test like you can with the type testing done on conventional micro emulsion. You have to have 6% SBS in order to pass these tests. And we're just assuring that our agencies are getting a great emulsion no matter who makes it. On the mix design, you can see highlighted the Cantabro test is used to assure durability, only used for the premium microsurfacing. So this is the DSR, as mentioned before, the DSR and MSER test are used to test the emulsion supply. So after the DSR, you can verify that you have a highly modified asphalt emulsion. So we're not only testing the residue by the DSR, but we're also testing the base asphalt prior to manufacturing the emulsion. And it's used to characterize the viscous and elastic behavior of asphalt binders at medium to high temperatures. So we use the same piece of machinery that we use for DSR to perform the MSER test, which is the well-established creep and recovery test concept to evaluate the binder's potential for permanent deformation. So in this test, two separate parameters are determined, and one of them is non-recoverable creep compliance, which is the JNR, and the second is the percentage of recovery, which is called the MSR recovery during each loading cycle. So this is similar to roadways on the behavior. It looks at repetitive loads without waiting for the asphalt to recover, with multiple vehicles driving on the roadway without recovery time. So we're basically measuring repetitive stress. And this is how we look at all modified asphalt, including hot mix now. And this is an advancement in how we're able to look at pavement performance. This MSER test is critical to early performance and power steering burns and long-term durability from snowplows. So this test is basically a better indicator of the presence and performance of polymer. For the mix testing, we're recommend evaluating through the Cantabro. So this machine up there, this is the LA abrasion machine without the steel balls. And here we have 3 Marshall pills. There's a conventional slurry, conventional microsurfacing, and highly modified microsurfacing. So these pills are put into this machine. They're undergoing 300 cycles. We are looking for the percentage of mass loss after the 300 cycles for all of them. And we're basically testing for durability. So you can see the average mass loss for slurry is 5 to 10, microsurfacing 2.5 to 5, highly modified micro is 1 to 2. You can't really see them, but I keep these with me in my car all the time. But we do test these all the time in our lab up in Jackson, Mississippi. And this graph just represents 3 different types of conventional micro against a highly modified micro using the Cantabro test. So the blue column is type 3 aggregate, which is more surface area. So that's typically you're going to see more damage. The red area is type 2 aggregate, which is what we actually use down in Florida, which is less surface area. So you're going to typically see less damage. You're still going to see significantly less loss with a highly modified system. And the highly modified micro performs actually very well with both types 2 and 3. The last 2 columns are just conventional micro with certain other fibers, which we're not really going to go into today. So as we're talking about the evolution of microsurfacing, obviously there's been advances in equipment over the years. Slurry surfacing systems are mixed in by specially designed application equipment, which includes compact, truck-mounted, trailer-mounted, or continuous run pavers. Each type of machine carries a quantity of unmixed materials, which are blended in a continuous flow pug mill. And I love some of the older pictures too. They're kind of fun how they used to do things. So this is a mobile mix paver where you see the mineral filler is where you can control the different properties and materials that go in the mix to be applied. These ingredients are delivered in very specific, correct proportions into a paddle mixer or pug mill to produce a slurry, which is discharged into the spreader box, which you see up on the top right. And the spreader box basically receives and contains the mix. It evenly distributes the material, agitates the mix to prevent segregation, and meters the material onto the road surface, and of course applies the final texture. So how do we make it easy, right, to switch for if you've been using conventional and you want to try highly modified microsurfacing? So with premium microsurfacing, we're using the same equipment, the same crew, and it's the same return to traffic time as conventional microsurfacing. So this is something really easy if as a contractor you want to try it, or as an agency, if you want to have your contractor try it. You already have, what you need in place if you're already doing conventional microsurfacing. This is a video. This is down in Margate. This is other than the project Tor was talking about in Lakeland in 2014. This is probably one of the oldest ones in Florida. Just going to show you really quick. Scratch course is already down. And you can see it goes down as Tori showed earlier. It looks brown until, until it's set. So great. So, we're looking for roads that have a good profile, that have a good base. We can micro over roads that have already been, already have micro on it. And, what's the best use for these systems? We've used it really everywhere. And I'll show you, I'll quickly walk through some examples. The first city to use highly modified microsurfacing was the city of Dallas in 2012. Since then, there's been about 20 million gallons applied from Boston to Oregon, San Antonio, Mexico City to Florida, and dozens of agencies in between, very warm climates and very cold climates. This is AlDOT. They've actually used a lot of high mod. This is on I-59, I-20. This was placed in 2018. The open graded friction course is failing around it in other sections, and AlDOT decided to substitute 3 miles for a test section for high mod. This is, again, the City of Margate project, and this was a 12-year-old asphalt. It was on the list to be resurfaced in 2018. The Public Works Director decided to use high mod in 2017. I don't have any before pictures, but this photo was taken about 18 months after the project. And just in terms of the pavement condition, according to the client, 12-year-old asphalt with severe raveling and moderate reflective cracking. And at the time, it had been down for 3.5 years. This is after 5 years. This is after 5.5 years. And this is earlier this year. So, this was 6 years old earlier this year. It's still performing well on a road that was in pretty poor condition. So just an example of less early damage. This is in California. Left, you have conventional, right is 6%. There was 90% less power steering burns on that project. Speaking to heavy turning traffic in Texas, this is located behind a football stadium. So you have a couple hundred buses there every week. This was taken 2 years after service. Snow, I know we're from Florida, we're used to the heat and the rain, and that's what we get down here in hurricanes, but I know there's some of you on here that do experience actual cold climates. So yes, it has been, we have used it a lot where there are snow plows being used. One example of many, and I have more, by the way, if anyone wants more case studies or wants to talk to our people who actually live in areas who get snow, be glad to provide that information to you. So this was in Northern California. There were a few different preservation they tried to use there starting in 2016. In terms of the, let's see, this is, okay, so they're getting 120 inches of snow, elevations 4,500 feet, lots of snow plowing. In terms of the pavement condition, it was fair to good, but you had a bunch of different types of cracking. So you have your typical edge cracking, you had your typical thermal cracking that you're going to see in those climates. This is just, one example of a picture taken 4 years after where the high mod was placed. And this is in the high Sierras with 21 feet of snow. And this is what it looked like 4 years post-project. This is an example of the conventional microsurfacing on the left and the highly modified micro on the right. and the highly modified micro was actually placed 3 years prior to the conventional micro. And the photo was taken in 21, 5 years after high mod, 2 years after conventional, and you can see the snow plow marks, on the left side. This is a report if you want some more information on that actual group of projects in this one neighborhood. It's right there, or I can share it for you after, but it just came out this year. Basically says in colder climates, the high mod emulsion has proven to resist thermal cracking, snowplow damage, and other distresses. And also in the warm, hot weather, the high mod emulsion has provided improved resistance to scuffing, shoving, and pushing at intersections and cul-de-sacs. And again, just major findings. It does work well in cold climates. The treatments, with the snowplow areas have performed well for a period of 4 to 5 years. I think the one exception was the 2019 project with the conventional micro, as you saw the pictures of. Just again, make sure, the performance of any treatments that you use are greatly influenced by the contractor, choosing the right roads, and you as an owner, making sure that you have the right mix design, you have the right spec, and that you are inspecting everything, because you only get what you inspect, as Troy can speak on. So that's pretty much what I had. We can run through, I think, to the end.
That's it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, we had a question about compaction. Do you have any, you roll it in at all?
And we do not roll it here, at least I don't, as my agency. I've never used a roller.
Yeah, I
on
didn't.
Micro.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just about out of time. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. I'm going to put my email in the chat area, and so feel free to email. And so anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. Troy and Amy, thanks for persevering and battling through the technical difficulties. So anyway, if you're on this call or in this webinar and you want to be included on the emails later, for other months, just email me and I'll put you on the list. And so anyway, we typically only have one for November, December. So it's going to be December 13th. And the topic of next, or in December 13th, an agency's asset management journey. And it's a one-on-one conversation with an infrastructure director. And it's Kendra Parrish with the town of Holly Springs, North Carolina. So again, it's December 13th at 11:30 a.m. And thank everybody for coming out. Great job, Troy and Amy. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.